I'm Oliver O'Connor. I'm the Chief Executive of the Irish Pharmaceutical Healthcare Association. Good morning and welcome to the IPHA Digital Think-In series. This is the fourth of a series of 6 events we're running in this autumn into the middle of November. We're very grateful, of course, as I mentioned before, to our sponsors Unifar, whose support is crucial to helping us run the Digital Think-In series. As many of you will know, Unifar has for many years sponsored our annual conference, and in this year, Unifar is sponsoring our Think-In series, which we hope you will agree has bringing us top-class insights into some of the big themes that are defining medicines and healthcare systems around the world. This morning, we're partnering with IPHA Institute, who are experts in applied economic research, to explore the value of health and medicines innovation for society. IPHA has done some excellent work for governments globally on the benefits of healthcare investments and innovation, and they're doing also some work for us now in that regard, and we hope to share the results of that study with you presently in the coming months. Medicines innovation, of course, creates tremendous value for society, but often it is looked at in terms of costs alone. Here, with the partnership with IPHA, we are trying to change the perception somewhat to thinking of healthcare as an investment for economic and social benefits. And of course, in the time we live in, this is very much to the fore with COVID, but it has been a feature of the approval of medicines on a product by product basis for quite some time. And so we want to base our policy engagements with the state on evidence, and it's crucial that we have evidence about the value of medicines and healthcare investment, as well as about the costs of those products that our members bring forward. So this morning, we're going to hear from a fantastic team of experts in this field, which I think will be highly stimulating to you and really set a really good discussion for the start of our week in Ireland. We had a bank holiday yesterday. We're first going to hear from Professor Zaza Katsarava, who is president of the European Headache Federation. He will share some insights into migraine, and indeed migraine, I think, has been analysed by IPHA in terms of the social and economic benefits of better treatment for this condition. Then we will hear from Professor Dennis Oswald, the founder and chief executive of IPHA Institute, who will deal with some value for medicines teams in Ireland and in Germany, and perhaps with some insights from the other work that he has done in other countries. And finally, we're delighted to have Alan Donnelly join us. Alan is Executive Chairman of Sovereign Strategy and patron of the G20 Health and Development Partnership. Alan will deal with policy tools and implications of healthcare investments. So, of course, we will have time at the end for discussion. I will chair that. I will be back, and we will take some questions that have come in on the chat function as well. But from my own interactions with IPHA, I know that there is a tremendous richness in the insight that Dennis and his colleagues bring. And so I am personally looking forward very much to this presentation this morning. And so I will hand over now to Professor Katsarava.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Let me share my slides. Can you all see my slides?
That's good, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, indeed.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. And my name is Zaza Katsarava. I'm a clinician. I'm a neurologist. You see me in my working outfit, taking care of patients. And I took my time because I thought it's very interesting to talk to the public we very rarely deal with. And I thank Professor Oswald to connect me and to invite me for this presentation. I think today, from the introduction, we match our interest in the in covering. For example, we take the migraine disorder, which is very frequent, and we try to understand how much burden is related to migraine and what can we gain if we invest in the treatment of migraine, just as an example. So here's my disclosures, and it's important for you to know that I'm also the chairman of the so-called Lifting the Burden of Headache Worldwide, which is an NGO which is connected to the both biggest professional organizations, to the European Headache Federation. I'm the president of IPHA, and to the International Worldwide Headache International Society. And we are in official partnership with the World Health Organization. And of course, we are linked with several academic institutions. Very briefly, this is where we are. We started to, the LTB started its work in 2003. And we, the two most important cooperations we have, it's the WHO and IPHA, Institute of Health Metrics Evaluation in Seattle. I will come to that later. And these are, let's say, three major aims of our organization. We wanted to assess the prevalence and burden of headache.
Zaza, sorry for interrupting you. We just see your first slide. I don't know.
Because I clicked?
Perfect, perfect.
Okay, then it's better now. So we are here. We wanted to assess the prevalence and burden of headache worldwide, not only in the rich part of the world. We wanted to improve medical care for headache patients worldwide. And we also wanted to create awareness and visibility of headache as a medical problem. This is our output. There are more than 100 publications, several preparations, several books we published. This is one of the milestone publications from 2007. Here we analyzed what was known in the literature about the prevalence and burden of headache and migraine worldwide. And there are two important messages. Migraine is prevalent. It affects 12% of the general population, so it's enormously frequent. But what you see here is the studies, and these studies were done in the United States, some in South America, and in Europe. So we did not know anything about headache prevalence and burden in large parts of the world, in Africa, in Russia, in China, in India, etc., etc. So we dedicated, let's say, 15 years of work to these, and you see how many projects did we do, or we continue to do, in all over the world. And first step was to bridge the gap of knowledge. What do we know about the prevalence of headache worldwide? And we published a lot from different parts of the world. And I think we successfully contributed to this series of publications. You might be aware of the publications that appear every 5 years from the Institute of Health Metrics Evaluation from Seattle, which are called Global Burden of Disease Study. In these publications, they try to rank and compare different diseases, fatal diseases and non-fatal diseases, according to their prevalence and burden. And they use different metrics, let's say years lived with disability. And of course, it's biased by the fact what is published or what's not published. But at least we could contribute to that very much, and we achieved that migraine is ranked or was ranked as a 7th disabler among all non-fatal diseases. We also kept our eye on the fact that migraine is the 3rd cause of disability in people under 50. So in the time where the people create families, develop their career, they are problem with migraine, and we know that migraine, especially chronic form of migraine, is associated with a lower socioeconomic status. So one would ask whether migraine contributed to the lower socioeconomic status because it's hurdled the individual's development. So very briefly, so the first result is migraine and headache. They are frequent and affect about 15% of general population. The another more important part is that the 3 to 4% of a population all over the world, they suffer from nearly daily headache, daily migraine. And this is, of course, associated with a significant burden of individuals, but also their social environment. Now we move to another series of publications that were performed in Europe, just in order to study what's going on in Europe in terms of migraine, prevalence, burden, disability, and costs. And of course, the quality of medical care, because sometimes we get an impression that we in rich part of the world, in Europe, United States, we know everything best, everything better, and if it comes to improvement, it should be improved somewhere else, which is not the case. Here you see the publication of, it is called Eurolight project, and it was performed in 10 EU countries. And we have collected the data of about 8,000 respondents. So the main findings were we asked differently here. We asked about headache yesterday, which is a new novel approach because usually in the prevalence studies, respondents are asked like, have you had headache last year? Or what do you think on how many days in the past, in the previous 3 months, did you have headache? And of course, we all understand that the people cannot remember or recall how many headache days did they have in the last 3 months. Here we asked about headache yesterday. So the question was, did you have headache yesterday? Because everyone would know whether the person had or did not headache yesterday. And what you see here is that in the European population, 17% suffer from headache every single day. And half of them, so about 60%, suffer from severe headache, which impacts their functioning. So if we divide 17 by 2, let's say 8% of the European population suffers from the impairment and the productivity impairment and the well-being impairment every single day. We have to acknowledge our comorbidities because about 20% of our patients with migraine have a comorbid anxiety. 7% have a comorbid depression, and 5% have both. If they suffer from chronic migraine, which is called everyday migraine, these comorbidities increase. So 40% anxiety, 17% depression, 14% both. And once we count the time which is lost because of migraine, then you see that in usual migraine, 30% of females and 20% of males lose 10% of their lifetime. And if they suffer from chronic migraine, 50% of females and 44% of males lose 20% of their time. So this is what we learned here, that migraine in Europe accounts for the huge costs in the quality of life and burden. We also counted how much does it cost, and mainly migraine produces the indirect costs, and we calculated per person annual cost of migraine about 1,200 euros, and then you calculate it on a 15% of the European population. It's a huge amount of money. The next issue is productivity. And unfortunately, we do not really have studies on that. I think the only study that have ever been performed is done by us. We were able to perform a study in Turkey in the Ford Otosan company with approximately 9,000 employees. And then you see here that we had counted 74 days per year of absenteeism, 1,240 days in the year of presenteeism, but the most important finding is that 2.5% of employees were responsible for about 50% of the losses. So this clearly shows us that it would be a very effective intervention, because if we can improve something here with a 2.5%, we can improve 50% of that what was lost. So The next finding is headache and migraine result in a significant loss of productivity, which can be improved. So the question here is, what you see here is just from my clinical practice. You see a headache diary from a German patient who is severely affected by migraine, and you see this patient suffers from migraine almost every day. Here is the intensity of pain. Here is the medication taken, painkillers every day. This is not simply to bring the tears on your faces, but to show you that these patients can be improved. And you see the difference before treatment and after treatment. So the migraine is not Alzheimer's disease. It's not like amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Then you diagnose it and can't do anything about it. Migraine can be very effectively treated. And now we come to the point, is it done even in rich Europe or not? And here we sought to understand what is the quality of evidence-based medication prescriptions in Europe. And you see here, for example, in Germany, only 10% of people with migraine receive triptans, which are considered to be a golden standard of acute treatment. And triptans have been introduced 30 years ago, and still only 10% receive it. The patients who require preventative medication, only 1% receive it. And it's very difficult to whom to blame, because it's not easy. There are several stakeholders. For example, patients by themselves, they seek medical advice only in 25%, 75% did not. And this happens in Germany with a free access to medical care. So people simply do not ask for it because they are stigmatized that migraine is not a biological disease, but it's something for girls. So this is what we have to make the population clear. Migraine is a neurobiological disease. It's not a disease of a hysteric female, so to say. It's a neurobiological disease like myocardial infarction or like stroke, and it can be effectively treated. So if they go to general practitioners, it's a higher chance to receive treatment. Triptans in 35% and preventative only in 6%. So here the next target, the education of general practitioners, because they take care of 90% of migraine patients. If they go to neurologists, they receive triptans in 60% and preventative only in 14%. So here is the next step to do, that we headache specialists also have to educate the general neurologists. Is it a German problem? No. In France, it's the same. Triptans in 14%, preventative medication in 3%, 65% do not visit a doctor, and everything like that. In Austria, the same. So the next question is, we need to improve the quality of medical care for headache patients, and we have to improve the awareness and visibility of headache as a neurobiological disease and a medical problem. We have done this. We performed an intervention study in Estonia because it's a small country, and there were people in different settings at the University of Tartu and general practitioners, and we were able to demonstrate that the simple, structured education can improve primary care management for headache. And this is a controlled intervention study. So we have done, I think, a lot, and we are continuing to do a lot. And I think we have, the most important is we can demonstrate that there are issues that should be addressed, because and there are something that can be improved. And this is a gain not only for individuals, but for the entire society. I would like to address your attention to the editorial we wrote with Tim Steiner, Neglected Headache. Is it an ignorance? Is it an arrogance? Or is it an insouciance of the society that doesn't pay attention to 15% of their general population? And this is my last slide. It's not enough to take 2 aspirins and stick your head in the sand. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Katsarava. That's fascinating and really instructive as about a condition which is not indeed receiving the level of intervention, indeed valuable intervention that could be given. And I'm sure there are others as well. I'm very impressed with your global ambition from the very start, and indeed the data and the evidence that you bring to the case you're making there. Dennis, do you want to take it from here?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Zaza. I will share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Dennis, we can see if you want to put into present mode.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Zaza. And in my presentation, I try to connect dots, and I'm very proud that Alan and Zaza joined this panel and that we are invited to the IPHA Digital Thinking. And my topic will be the quantifying the value of medicines. And I think the impressive speech of Zaza showed that we have to focus on the value of medicines. But we need to give more evidence to political decision makers. We need to create a need for action. And to do so, in my opinion, we need to speak their language. And often, the pharmaceutical industry, the medtech industry, also the health economy, they are talking old language, and I think that we can open doors and open the floor for discussions if we try to speak the languages of political decision makers next to health politicians. And that's the reason why in my presentation I want to focus on the one hand on the value of medicines. And I pick up the ball from Zaza, and I want to present to you the socioeconomic burden of migraine translated in a new language. And then I want to build up a bigger framework, and then I want to focus on Ireland and want to give you arguments why an investment in health in Ireland, but also in other countries, is smart. And last but not least, in the outlook and conclusion, I will give you an idea about the socioeconomic burden of cardiovascular diseases in Ireland, which is, I think, very surprising for you. So just a couple of words about IPHA. IPHA is an international, or has a worldwide presence. We are a think tank. We have 50 plus employees, analysts, researchers, and consultants. We have conducted already 360 projects for companies, associations, and ministries, and we like to work in this kind of triangle, right? Working for companies, for ministries, and associations to learn about how they speak their languages and connecting dots. We have 4 locations in Germany, Greece, Ireland, and US. And we conducted projects active projects in 21 countries. Our models have been applied for 180 countries in the world. What is the purpose of why I'm so enthusiastic about the value of medicines? I want to answer questions like, what is the burden of disease in Ireland, and how does medicine's innovation contribute to the economy and society? So how can we kickstart a dialogue to communicate the social benefit of innovations? I'm a mechanical engineer, and I studied business administration and economics and did my PhD in health economics. And there's an innovation part in every sector. It's fabulous if we get new innovation. If we talk about innovations in the industrial health economy, then what is the reaction? Oh no, it will be expensive. And I really want to shift this, or try to foster a paradigm shift, that investment in health, investment in innovation isn't only a cost factor. No, it's a driver of growth, driver of employment, driver of well-being, driver of health. And we have to reposition our investments in health in the future. Now I want to give you an example about the socioeconomic burden of migraine in Germany and give you a feeling how we do this. So we are working with all the studies Zaza presented to us. We need prevalences, incidences. We need to identify the number of migraine-related headache days. And then that's the translation in the new language. Then we try to measure how high is the loss of paid work due to migraine-related headache days. And we are not only measuring productivity, but also the unpaid work activities, voluntary work or household production, because that's also a societal impact. Think about parents who have been allowed to take care of kids before COVID, so they are helping or caregiver burden. So all these activities are also contribution to society. This idea to measure social impact popped up after an elevator speech with our Chancellor Angela Merkel, because she wanted to know if health is a smart investment, and I will show you some numbers about it, who also convinced her. But then she asked, but what is the impact to my society, to my voters? How can I explain to them that it's smart to invest in health? And some answers maybe can be delivered by our research, which we are also doing in cooperation with other universities and institutions. How do we do it? First of all, we need a health burden, right? We have to identify a health burden. That's the migraine prevalence and headache frequency. And then we're transferring this to health, we are connecting the dots between health and socioeconomic burden by quantifying wider socioeconomic losses. So that means that we are measuring absenteeism and presenteeism on headache days, and can monetize or value this, last but not least, by giving them a kind of a value for the lost hours of productivity. And this is according to age, gender, and industry sector. So last but not least, we will answer, how does this burden affect GDP? In Ireland, maybe the GNI. Because this is the language political decision maker understand. Ministers of finance, ministers or presidents or chancellors, they understand if we can show how diseases affect GDP, because they have the goal to increase GDP, stabilize employment or increase employment. And so if we can show how health impacts this goals, their goals, then we can open up a discussion. What did we do? We used a GHC study about the distribution in headache frequency in health states. We also use the global burden of disease study to estimate prevalence rates. And certainly we have to adapt it to the German population. So we took this clinical study results and extrapolated or modeled it in a dynamic population model, so that we can not only show what Zaza did on a patient level, but we modeled it on a macroeconomic point of view, so on a societal point of view. So how does this burden affect the entire economy in Germany? Here, some in my opinion, when we conducted this study, I was really shocked due to this major impact of migraine. So I wasn't aware about this drama, because such a lot of people suffer due to migraine. And you can see elderly people, there is a decrease of the burden. Most of the burden is it's between 20 and 60. And surprising, you don't get to know males, in my opinion, who announce that they have migraine, but 1/3 of the burden is due to migraine from males, not only from females. Here is something I was shocked about. Did you know that 5% of the migraine patients have 15+ days of headache related to migraine? So every second day, it's incredible. And this part of the patients take 26% of all the headache days we measured. So there are a couple, most of them, they have 1 to 3 days per month, but think about the patients who have 15 plus, that's incredible, that's how they survive. And what's the result? Why to reposition migraine as or to send a spotlight to this topic? We have 15.5 million migraine patients in Germany over 20 years. That sums up to 836 million headache days. That it's equivalent to 4.5 monthly headache days on an average per patient. And what I already mentioned, 5.4% of the migraineurs experience headache days on 15 plus. But now to the numbers, it's 1.22 billion hours, which the socioeconomic burden can be measured with 1.22 billion hours we lose due to headache headache days in paid and unpaid work activities. And this is equivalent to 100 billion, in average, 100 billion euro GDP contribution. 100 billion per year. That's nearly as much as the automotive industry in Germany. So the burden is comparable to 1 year of productivity within one of the most important sectors of our economy. So we have to, there is a need for action. And that, in other words, it's about 2.9% of the German GDP. So if we are not dealing with migraine in the future with different therapies, drugs, innovations, better processes, then we are talking about 3% of the GDP. And this, I think, it's a strong number and a clear point that we need to act. Now, why I'm so focused on giving other or talking another language or transfer the idea of not talking about health as a cost factor, but as a driver of growth and employment. I am really, and that's the dots I want to connect also with Alan, who is speaking after me. We have to foster a paradigm shift. Because especially after COVID-19, there will be cost containment initiatives again, and we have to foster the understanding that if we only see healthcare as a cost factor, then we have an issue also with our GDP, because investment in health stabilizes the GDP, stabilizes growth, stabilize employment, and we should consider we need to create this evidence for political decision makers that it's not all about cost containment and financing, but it's also to give impacts to society, impacts to GDP, impacts to employment. And the good thing is that we are aligned with the WHO initiatives. They also see the health sector as an essential social and economic impact part. But the only issue is that, or in my opinion, they don't see the industrial health economy as a major backbone of the health economy, right? They are focusing on healthcare economy, on inpatient physicians and dentists and so on. But I think we need to include also the industrial health economy, the pharmaceutical industry, the medtech industry, the biotech industry, and so on, because in my opinion, they are the backbone of an efficient value chain of care. And here are some numbers for Ireland. And this is impressive, in my opinion. We measured for the first time the health economy. What's the impact of the entire health economy? That means the healthcare economy, the industrial health economy, and the services and support. And it contributes 22% to the Irish GNI star. So every fifth euro in the GNI star is related to your health economy. That sums up to 33 billion euro in Ireland. nearly 300,000 people are working in this sector. And to position health economy in Ireland, you can compare it to the finance, insurance, and real estate sector, or it's even 9% points higher than manufacturing. Or you can add manufacturing and the manufacturing of food, of food products and beverages, and you reach the importance of health economy. Or look at the major impact to the labor market. So nearly every seventh person in Ireland is working for the health economy. And here a comparison. Here we on the one hand we showed in 2015, because we wanted to have this international benchmark. And in the top of the slide, I mentioned the usual KPI if you describe or try to compare healthcare systems. So you take the health expenditures in relation to the GDP, right? And you can see Germany, and I don't like the word by the way health expenditures, it's more like health investments. So in Germany, we are investing 11% of our GDP. In average, in the EU 28, it's 10%. In GDP categories in Ireland, it's 7%. In GNIs, it's 12%. Switzerland, 12%. US, 17%. And now, if we talk about what's that we should invest more in health, then the question will be, what is the return on this investment? And you can measure the return on investment if you say, what is the contribution, or one approach is to measure the return on investment is, what is the return measured in GDP categories? So how much GDP or GNI impact has this investment within your country? And we see in Germany, we are investing 11% and get 12% GDP contribution. In EU, it's 10% and 10%. It's not a bad investment. In Ireland, it's measured in 7% in expenditures or investments. It relates to 16% of the health economy. In Switzerland, it's even more. In the US, it's less. And the reason is they have much more imports, right? They have great research, but especially in the industrial health economy, but they are importing a lot of drugs in there. And so there is, this characterizes not only the healthcare systems, but also how they deal in the international context. And here I want to share with you the point why I'm so surprised about Ireland, right? You may know that you have a strong industrial health economy, but I was surprised that it's even stronger than in Switzerland in the share of your overall health economy. So the reason is, on the one hand, you have a very strong industrial health economy, but your health economy in total in Ireland is not so strong, or it could be stronger in my opinion. But it shows that you in Ireland, you are the industrial health economy hub in Europe, and that's I think really a very important message. Why do we do this kind of analysis? Because yeah, we want to open the floor for new debates about evidence-based decision making, and we need to create this kind of evidence to challenge health politicians, to challenge their decisions, their laws. What are the impacts of their laws to the economy, to the GDP, to employment? I think this data is very relevant, and hopefully we can establish kind of health economy reportings. Not only we measured it for 9 countries, and hopefully we can establish this reporting in the future. And then if we do so, then maybe we can be aligned to Susanna Jakob, who mentioned health investment is the smartest investment because it pays off. And this leads me to the outlook and the next steps. So we want to underline that health is a smart investment, and that we have to deal with this situation, and we need to measure how innovation affect the society in the future. So we measured the impact of several drugs, and this are also published. One example is a drug from Novartis. It's Entresto. We measured that the market introduction of Entresto leads to 110,000 saved life years in Germany, and this is equivalent to 2.3 billion euro GDP contribution up to the year 2030. And such messages are important to reposition innovation and focusing more on the patient side, that this helps patients to be healthier. And we want to measure this return on investment so that we can open a discussion between ministries, political stakeholders, companies and associations and NGOs. What are I mentioned that I want to give you some insights about our study or preliminary results about what we are doing for Ireland on behalf of IPHA. What is the value of medicines? That's a study aim. We want to measure the value of medicines. We want to demonstrate the value of Ireland's annual medicine spending. We have chosen 3 disease areas. We want to compare the economic performance between 2 scenarios. On the one hand, the status quo, and the the counterfactual scenario that if innovation will take place in Ireland. And I want to show you one example due to the time, and I want also to give Alan some time to take maybe some points to discuss it also on a political level. What are the preliminary findings? The total economic benefits of cardiovascular disease medicines for the Irish society is 5.6 billion euro in the next 5 years. That means that we gain 17% years life lost. That means nearly 155,000 years due to new drug launches, and this is equivalent in monetary terms to 5.6 billion. And this, just to compare it, that's the GDP of the Midland region in Ireland. So we need to establish the social impact, in my opinion, to not only create the need for action to invest more, but also to reallocate resources, right? That we think about in which disease areas do we have to invest more? In which disease areas is the return on investment higher than in others? I can see, and that's really also shocking for me, the time how long it takes that new drugs come to the markets. It's in Ireland 10 times higher than in Germany, 10 times. And you are the industrial health economy hub. Then the percentage of new drugs in relation to older drugs, it's 50% in Ireland, around about 50%. In other countries, 75%. And so I think there is a need in Ireland. Maybe you invest enough, but maybe we should rethink where to invest in the future. And now I hand over to Alan, and I prepared this slide to even show the importance to discuss or to reposition health as an investment, because it will be even more important due to the rising debt crisis, right? If now, hopefully, if we turn out of the crisis, how will governments react? What will they do? And hopefully they won't forget to invest in health. And so I hand over to Alan. Thank you so much.
Dennis, thank you very much indeed. And Oliver, thank you for the invitation to participate today in this IPHA webinar. First of all, I'm not a clinician, I'm not a doctor, I'm a former politician. And what interested me in this whole area of investments in health, in research and development and innovation was the fact that when it comes to the challenges facing humanity, there are two existential threats. One, of course, is climate change, and politicians now, I think, are getting to grips with the issue of climate change. But the other existential threat, which we are living through at the present time, is the risk to global health security. And the reason why we created the G20 Health and Development Partnership at the beginning of 2017, which was the start of the German presidency of the G20, is because health was not discussed in that context by world leaders. When you consider how much of the population and the GDP of the globe is contained within the G20, it seemed extraordinary to me that there was no discussion at a high level on the issue of health system strengthening, health system resilience, and global health security. Angela Merkel, who of course is a scientist, agreed to bring health onto the agenda of the G20, and we had the first health ministers meeting during her presidency. And that work is now intensified through the Argentinian presidency, Japan last year, where the Prime Minister had a series of health ministers meetings, and through the Saudi presidency at the present time. But what we discovered in the partnership, and I would stress to you that the G20 Health and Development Partnership is a not-for-profit organization. It represents organizations like Medicine for Malaria Ventures. It represents many of the partnerships that are working on specific disease silos, but it also represents the pharmaceutical industry and academia. What we discovered when we set up this partnership was that the health sector, the health industry, the health community really underperformed in its advocacy work. And particularly when it comes to getting politicians to understand the importance of research, product development, and innovation in tackling communicable diseases, but also non-communicable diseases like heart disease and diabetes. And we've tried to change the narrative, and I think we've had some success in the last 3 years in changing the narrative, and it's the reason why we very much welcome working with Dennis and IPHA. To get politicians to understand that spending on health has to be viewed as an investment. If you don't view spending on health as an investment, then of course the politics of health becomes very, very polarized. And what we've got to try and do is continue with that approach that we now have. And one of the challenges that I think Dennis and IPHA have thrown out is how do you measure the return on investment? One of the things, very much like the Irish government to look to do, perhaps in collaboration with the German government, would be to try and get a group of standard metrics adopted by the EU 27 for the way in which you measure investments in health and what the return on investment is. We're seeing today, because of a failure to invest in pandemic preparedness and health system strengthening, that according to the IMF, we're going to have a fall in gross domestic product globally of at least 4.5%, probably more than that. When you look at the amounts of investment required to strengthen our health systems, to strengthen our research and development base when it comes to life sciences and biotechnology, if only a fraction of that 4.5% GDP that will be lost was invested and could be invested in the future in health system strengthening, global health security, pandemic preparedness, and research and development, we will be in a much stronger position. We've known for some time, and it's been reported by Dr. Tedros, the head of the World Health Organization, by Gro Harlem Brundtland, the former Norwegian Prime Minister who heads up the Pandemic Monitoring Board, that we were facing an imminent threat of a pandemic. And yet we look at the level of preparedness, and frankly, it has been pretty poor around the world. Some countries have fared better, but generally it's been pretty poor. So how do we address these issues? Well, I think what we have said is that you cannot leave health to the health minister. And while the Irish health minister has a very good surname, I like the name Donnelly, I think it's a great surname, I don't think you can leave health to the health minister, whether it's Matt Hancock in Britain or Jan Spahn in Germany. Health, as I said at the very beginning, represents an existential, health security represents an existential threat to humanity. And therefore, it is essential that heads of government and finance ministers and central bank governors start to build in health system security and investments in health in their calculations on how they run their economy. And as you've seen from what Dennis has presented, the upside of investing in health is very, very significant indeed. And Ireland, with its pharmaceutical cluster, which I think, Oliver, is principally around Cork, but I'm sure it's in other parts of Ireland too. The growth of life science companies, biotech companies, can really be transformational in providing high value jobs. It can help in terms of universities, and I think in Ireland one of the problems may even be the ability to get enough graduates from universities in Ireland into the pharmaceutical industry. So we need a different narrative now on health, and as I say, that's one of the reasons why I would like us at an EU level and for Ireland and Germany to lead the way here, to look at a set of standard metrics which allow governments to monitor in a common way the way in which they're investing in their health systems and the way in which they're investing in research, product development and innovation. Indeed, one of the things that we have argued for in the G20 Health and Development Partnership is that there should be regular meetings of health and finance ministers. And this year, under the Saudi presidency of the G20, there have been 2 meetings of health and finance ministers. And the narrative, when you look at the declarations that come out of those meetings, has been transformed. Instead of looking at health as an issue of development aid for low-income countries, or looking at it in a very clinical and very narrow way, health and finance ministers now share a common view that this is about investment in humanity and about preventing a future pandemic in the coming years. And those pandemics don't just have to be novel viruses. We've got the pandemic of antimicrobial resistance, where there is significant market failure in bringing new antibiotics to the market, and also to make sure that they're properly managed so that people are not building up drug resistance. And then, of course, there are the hidden pandemics of non-communicable diseases like heart disease and diabetes, which are inflicting terrible costs from an economic point of view as well as a human cost point of view across the world. And so we've been saying to, for example, the International Monetary Fund, that there needs to be a process of, through their multilateral surveillance procedure, a process of measuring health system resilience, looking at investments in health. And they have a process called the Article 4 procedure, where every year they look at the performance of an economy, they look at the unemployment rate, they look at the growth rate, they look at the rates of investment. We believe strongly that, as well as building climate change into those calculations, they need now also to build health security into those calculations. And as I've said, the starting point could be for Ursula von der Leyen and the commissioners and the council to start that process within the European Union. But let me just come on to how this is all going to be funded. There's clearly, with the fall in GDP, a problem for countries about how they're going to fund their investments in the future. And that's why in the G20 Health and Development Partnership, we do strongly believe in public-private partnerships. We believe that the innovative pharma industry is at the heart of that, and that the innovative biotech companies that are growing and the life science companies are very much at the heart of that. But we recognize that there has to be new models of funding. And one of the things that we're doing currently in the G20 Health and Development Partnership is to have a look at innovative funding mechanisms and to have a look at blended funding mechanisms, where perhaps governments and the private sector come together through development banks, the European Investment Bank, or research departments of governments and the private sector to provide the funding for the essential research and development, product development that's necessary for the future. You know, the World Health Organization estimate that there's between 1 and 2 million pathogens out there that present a threat to humanity, much as COVID-19 has proved to be a massive global threat. How do we fund the research and development into tackling those potential pathogens? How do we fund the research and development into tackling the issues of non-communicable diseases? I know from the work that I do with Bloomberg that there are many private sector organizations out there, many private investors who want to invest in research and development in health. They want to provide innovative financing solutions to support the Sustainable Development Goal 3. But at the moment, the framework for investors to invest is very unclear and very uncertain. For example, how do you measure the return on investment? How do you ensure that you've got a regulatory framework that allows those private investors to invest part of their investment portfolio in something like a new antibiotic or a new diagnostic or a new therapeutic? And so the second thing, Oliver, that I think we need to do is we also need to look at the regulatory framework to bring more innovative finance into the development of new therapeutics, diagnostics, and vaccines. And that means that we need a regulatory framework which gives some certainty to potential private sector investors. Now, they're doing that in green finance. There's an enormous amount of work being done at the moment, particularly with the European Investment Bank and the European Commission, on helping to get private sector investors to put their resources into green finance. We need the same initiative at a global level for investments in health, in global health security. And I just want to mention one, and this is the third thing I wanted to say to you. In various discussions I've had over the last 2 or 3 years with the IDA in Ireland and with some people in the government of Ireland, I've asked them to look carefully at an initiative called GHIT, because it's always good to look at initiatives that are tried and tested and which could be rolled out. The Japanese government have been incredibly innovative in how they are tackling their health security issue. They have, of course, a rapidly aging population and a declining population. And so they're investing heavily in digital health, but they're also investing in health innovations. And their Global Health Innovation and Technology Fund, GHIT, is a joint venture between the public and the private sector to help fund research and development in those key sectors that need the resources. And the way they've done it is the following. The government has put in some core funding, and then they've gone out to non-traditional actors like Yahoo or Mitsubishi, and they've asked them to match the funding and put resources in. And there's a wide community now of private sector companies that are putting money into this blended finance initiative. And if you look at the GHIT initiative on their website, you'll see that this is a real partnership that is working to help develop the new medicines, the new therapeutics, etc., that we need to tackle some of these diseases. Now, the reason why I mention it to you in Ireland is with a population of 5 million, with an excellent cluster of pharmaceutical companies that represent a very large proportion of your economy, but also with a very strong financial services industry and a very strong tech industry. I would urge the Irish government, and I would urge IPHA to look at promoting a GHIT model in Ireland so that you can help to provide the funding necessary for the small biotech companies and to help develop further your sector. And I think that could play a significant part to address the issues that Dennis raised about the potential that the pharmaceutical industry has in Ireland. I want to conclude by just saying that this COVID-19 pandemic is a wake-up call for politicians. What we, and I still class myself to a certain extent as a politician, what we have to understand is that we cannot tackle these issues by emergency relief. We can't tackle the investments necessary in health through disaster relief, as though we've had a tsunami or we've had an earthquake. That is not going to be sufficient for the future. We need a strategically new approach to the way in which we invest in health. And I know that Ireland, being a very innovative country, a very creative country in so many policy areas, could be at the leading edge in helping to do that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Alan. You've paid a lot of compliments to Ireland there. It's very nice of you. And indeed, we do have a minister who shares who is related to you in some way, maybe 25 times removed or whatever, but there it is. We're glad that you had some contact with IDA Ireland. So very good. But look, I know we just have the two of you here now, and I thought that what I would do would be to ask a couple of questions myself and then come to one or two that are on the chat. So clearly the context is important for this discussion. We are, COVID-19 has meant that governments, and Ireland no less than others, have spent and are now spending enormous amounts of money that they never thought they would on health-related expenditure, on health systems, on prevention and avoiding disability and excess mortality. When they come out of this, I suspect it won't be simply a matter, like Dennis said, to say, well, let's stop spending money. The case for investment in health will appear stronger, but clearly the normal types of questions people in treasuries and so on, health ministries will ask will be, well, which parts of the investment are appropriate? Where is the efficiency question? Because at the end of the day, there's seldom a decision to say, let's increase our investment in health by 1% of GDP. It always comes down to specific measures or specific initiatives and so on. And in our case, of course, it comes down to specific new medicines. How, if we were to advise a government which wanted to reduce, as they all will, wanted to say, look, we have to have a more normal level. Some of that spending on COVID was efficient and useful, some of it wasn't. So we have to have a better way of understanding which will be the efficient type of investment in health, because we now understand the case better, the overall case, how will we decide what's the efficient part and what's the inefficient way of spending money? So I leave that question to you, Dennis, or Alan, whichever you want to take it up.
I can start, Alan, if it's okay for you. Very good question. I would maybe, I think there are a lot of indicators already at hands of the political decision makers, but one aspect they don't really consider, in my opinion, and this is the societal or the GDP or GNI perspective. And if I would invest as, or if I would be a decision maker, I would take into account how does my investment helps my society to be healthier? And last but not least, what is the contribution to GNI, right? And this is kind of the return on investment, or the health dividend. And it's only one aspect out of a lot of others, but you can benchmark this. You can benchmark how much do I have to invest in hospitals, and what is the health outcome, and how can we monetize it in GDP terms, and you can compare it to an innovative drug. And because you have, on the one hand, the value you're creating, and you have the investments you have to take, and then you have a value invest ratio. And the value invest ratio is comparable between different sectors within the health economy. And to provide this evidence to political decision makers that would be brand new, but it's not, it shouldn't, it's a complementary information, right? Because you need to consider other things. But if you have this this value invest ratio, like a cost benefit analysis on a micro level, then it may help political decision makers to reallocate resources. And that's something, it's feasible, and I would like to push this idea. And then maybe with this information, they rethink their decisions. And I don't want to say that this is the one and only measurement, but I would include it to have a bigger framework of, or to have more evidence to decide.
I think, Oliver, one of the things that I think every country must do, and they should be doing it now. Well, just let me take you back to 2009 with the economic crisis. What we didn't do in 2009 was, first of all, try to solve the crisis, and then subsequently look at how we needed to strengthen the financial systems. They actually went in parallel. So we had significant improvements in capital adequacy. We had financial system resilience strengthened, and that went hand in hand with trying to deal with the subprime crash that occurred. It wasn't done some months later. What I think is really important at the moment, and I would urge every government around the world to do this, is they should be conducting a very honest assessment of their health system resilience, preparedness, their health system resilience. And that should be done, in my view, independently, and it should be reported to Parliament. And it shouldn't be done on the basis that someone's going to feel, oh my God, we're all going to be massively criticised. I know in Britain, for example, the pandemic preparedness was based on a bad case of the flu. Well, obviously, COVID-19 is significantly worse than that. And there has to be a lot of honesty and transparency about this. And I would have urged governments to set up independently now an assessment of pandemic preparedness, and therefore of their health system resilience. And as Dennis says, I mean, there's lots of models. Y4 does it. We have one of our advisors who's the professor of health systems at Harvard University. They do it. It's not rocket science to look at how you measure and improve your health system resilience. But we shouldn't be leaving it until the end of next year. This should be going hand in hand with dealing with the pandemic, and politicians have got to get to grips with this.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Question for you, Dennis. We have one from our friend Paula Guerin, who compliments you on your presentation and asks, will you be able to project forward the impact of innovative medicines so as to enable public sector to embrace multi-annual budgeting for future medicines innovation? And I think I know the answer in our study,
Yes.
but go ahead.
No, Paula, thank you very much for the question. Exactly, this is one aspect of the study on behalf of IPHA, what we want to try to show. So the example of the example I presented was concerning the cardiovascular diseases. So what is the impact of innovation for the next, or what is the impact of introduced innovation for the next 5 years? And I think these numbers can help also to discuss with Treasury, with Minister of Finance, to discuss about budgets in the future.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Emmanuel from IPHA, indeed, who points out that the costs of investment in health is going to be expensive in the years ahead. And what role will or should private insurance funding or indeed out-of-pocket co-payments play in funding healthcare investments in the future? Alan, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's obviously a very highly political issue, because you then start discussing the whole concept of universal health coverage and how it's delivered. And you know, in the G20, for example, we had problems getting a resolution through the health ministers meeting because of various references to universal health coverage, and a major country across the Atlantic from you thought this was a reference to Obamacare. So the point is that it's a highly political issue, but I think there's a much better culture in Europe to be able to address some of these things. I'll tell you one area where we're really working at the moment in partnership with the insurance companies is in relation to patient safety, where there's a massive cost to national health services because of I mean, at the end of the day, the medical malpractice cases. And we're in discussions with the insurance companies now about how you significantly improve patient safety initiatives in hospitals so that there's less harm to the patient. And of course, that's a significant saving for the insurance sector. But you know, if you look at the different models in Belgium, you've got a mixture of social insurance and support from the central government. But in Britain, you've got a national health service. So these are highly political issues. But I do think that we have to approach this with an open mind, because the whole environment is going to be completely changed after this after we get through this pandemic.
Indeed, Alan, that's absolutely right. You know, we had our own discussion about potentially moving from a pay-as-you-go tax-funded health system to an insurance-based system, and of course, the political debate turned out to be more about public entitlements, political entitlements of the public. Where the one thing that is important about insurance companies is that they do manage to think ahead of their future liabilities much more than pay-as-you-go systems, and they're better at taking actions to reduce future liabilities because it's in the nature of what they do. So we're heading towards 9:15 here in our time zone. Dennis, I have one last question for you. So Chancellor Merkel asked you to show her, how do I tell the public about the value of health investments? And did you answer her question? And did she acknowledge your answer?
To be honest, that was the birth date of the social impact approach. I couldn't answer the question, and then as a scientist, I got back to my team and we discussed how can we do it. And we are publishing. The answer is if you introduce, we can measure if you introduce an innovative drug to the market, then we can measure what is the impact to society, also to unpaid activities, and we can measure it in GDP categories comparable to the impact of the entire health economy. And I shared this information with her and her team, she, to be honest, she didn't respond on this. But I think that in Germany, that's going more and more popular. It's not part of the HTA bodies, but I think it maybe in the future it will be considered. And I like to give a clear answer, and that's, in my opinion, cool. If you introduce an innovative drug, you can measure the value which is created for society, and then you can say how much is the investment someone has to take, and then you have the ratio, and think about an innovative drug which creates more value than the investments. Then it's smart to introduce it, right?
Absolutely. Of course. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. I'm sure she was impressed with the number about the product, the value of the German automobile industry as well. It's very, very close to the hearts of German politicians, of course. So with that, I must thank you again, Dennis. Thank you, Alan, very much for joining us for this digital thinking. Certainly it's been very stimulating, and there are plenty of themes and indeed suggestions to take up. We look forward very much, Dennis, to completing the work with you for the report you're doing for us, and to help in partnership, which a lot of people are mentioning, to help our public sector think through a new approach or an improved approach to healthcare investment in our country as well as others. Alan, you've really well pointed out the types of collaborations that Ireland could engage in. And I look forward to taking up some of those suggestions, perhaps with colleagues in other industries, but certainly next time we get a chance to see our health minister, when his diary is a little bit less full, we shall bear this in mind coming from his namesake. So, and of course, thank you earlier to Professor Katsurawa, whose insights were fascinating, and I enjoyed very much seeing those, and we will take them with us as well as we look forward to making this case for healthcare investment. So there it is. Thank you for very much again. And to all those who joined, I'm sorry if I couldn't come to your questions, but we will be taking up this theme again in the coming months on the production of your report. And we look forward to further episodes of our Digital Thinking series this autumn. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.